Yes, people, it is as always that time for that Magi greatness. So at first glance with this chapter, you will probably think, okay, this is a very simplistic chapter, and I will agree to an extent that this is not on the level of some of the previous chapters. Some of the previous chapters have been just completely off the chain, amazing, just like, you know, times 10 that Magi greatness. This one, it was definitely more simple. However, there's a lot of things you can infer from this one, and a lot of context clues as to some of the history and where some things start to connect. For starters, we learn in this chapter that there are 72 divine staffs. So you already got to look at it like this. Okay, there are 72 divine staffs. In the current world, there are 72 dungeons with probably 72 jinn. There have been 23 captured, and up to number 71 have been revealed. Probably 72 might be Ugo, who knows? But as of right now, there have been 23 captured out of 71 that we've seen thus far. You can totally see the connections already starting to build there. With 72 divine staffs, I'd imagine that after a certain point, probably from the events where you see King Solomon and all his people and they're already adults, that's probably at the point where King Solomon had 72 people, or 71 including himself, 72, to have these staffs. And then what I'm guessing is ultimately they had ultimate assimilation using these staffs, and that's how a lot of these people became jinn. But not quite all of them, because we do have some of the Magi that have some of the staffs. Originally Scheherazade, but now Titus has the staff, so that's 1. You have Aladdin, that's 2. Tudal, 3. Gyokuwen, 4, and Yunnan, 5. So you take away 5 staffs, so that might mean that there's 5 dungeons that don't even have anything in there, or if they do, there might not even be a jinn in there. Maybe those 5 staffs, like, basically take from those dungeons, or maybe 5 of those staffs pretty much are in dungeons that have already been captured, or in dungeons that just won't appear. And from what I'm guessing as well, I'm guessing that Aladdin, he doesn't have a staff, but he's probably going to have Solomon's staff, whichever dungeon it may be. Maybe that's number 72, maybe 72 is Solomon himself or something, but I'm guessing that his staff that he's supposed to have, because right now, remember, he was using that old lady's staff, so I'm imagining that if he does indeed get an official staff, it's probably going to be that one that King Solomon has with the circular top, and that's probably going to be his staff whenever he gets it, if it's in one of the dungeons that we haven't seen, or it's already been captured, or somebody's already got a hold of it. Maybe Ugo's holding on to it. And I just can't believe who Ugo is in the previous life, like in Al-Mataran. Like, from the Ugo we've seen, we just saw him beasting, we saw him going into a monster when he was fighting Judal, how he was ripping shit up. It's like, how does he go from this hipster scientist guy to the amazing beast that he was when we seen Aladdin summoning him? It just doesn't make sense. He must have went through one hell of a time skip from this point now that we're looking at him to when he was pretty much with King Solomon as a man and everything, because just goddamn, he's so different. He's very scientifical, and it's kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of things that they came up with, like the divine staffs and turning everyone into jinn with ultimate assimilation and all this stuff, was due to him with his scientific methods, because the dude is just so goddamn smart. And another thing in this chapter that's very interesting is that in Al-Mataran, there was a continental rift as well, and it was spreading. At first, it was like a few kilometers, and they could kind of cross over it, not that hard, but it kept on spreading. And I'm guessing that it had some sort of connection to the continental rift that ultimately made the Dark Continent down there, and there's a possibility that we will see as well the finalists in Al-Mataran, because I wouldn't be surprised if the finalists are from Al-Mataran, and they were probably originally monsters. Maybe that's something that triggers all the events with Sheba. I don't know, maybe like if she was too freaked out at how they can be monsters and humans at the same time, like, you know, they were monsters in the Dark Continent. And it also makes you wonder just what is it about the Dark Continent that gives them the ability. But I'm curious, is it that this is just a complete mirror, and nearly everything on this world of Al-Mataran is identical to the world in our world? Because if there's a continental rift and it's slowly spreading, which will ultimately lead to the continental, you know, the Dark Continent, then if that's on our world, what is it? Is that everything that happened on this earth slowly happens to this earth? Or, you know, what's up with that? And seeing Ethnon in this chapter is just as weird, because we've seen Ethnon in, you know, the present day when he was around, and he was just a very different person. You know, he's obviously with Al-Thaman, he's evil, well, seemingly evil, and it just kind of makes you wonder with Ethnon, what was up with him? Like, he's best friends practically with Solomon in the past. He respected him highly, so it had to take something, either Solomon's death at the hands of one of these beasts, and he just followed whoever would become Gyokuwen, or maybe he felt as though this was something that Solomon might have wanted. It definitely makes you wonder what would lead somebody that is practically best friends with him in order to become what he is now, or unless he still thought at the time that he was doing the right thing by him. It just gave me a crazy theory. What if he was actually not that bad and Sinbad killed him because he knew something about him? You never know. You get a little bit more of the characterization of Solomon in this chapter. Very playful, very similar to Aladdin. Like, right now, Solomon just reminds me a lot of a young, you know, like Aladdin Aladdin now. He's very playful. He's playing with the beast. I'm curious if we're going to see his titty fetish similar to Aladdin's titty fetish on like now, or is that something that just Aladdin has completely his own, or maybe the playfulness that he has with these monsters, how he wants to play with them, is similar to Aladdin's, you know, titty fetish. Like, that's his little playfulness, and that's Aladdin's playfulness. Either way, it's still getting a little bit of, like, Solomon, he's a fair and just but stern ruler, from what I'm getting thus far. Is like, yeah, he'll show you the way. He'll show you, like, these people aren't bad. You can't be prejudiced towards things, but at the same time, he also wants to, you know, play. He wants to enjoy life and kind of understand one another with these creatures. So it's really interesting to get a little bit more of Solomon and just how much he's similar to Aladdin. Because to this date, you still can't really rule out the fact that as a possibility, Aladdin is maybe the reincarnation of him of some sort. Since Ugo was a scientist, who knows what he came up with. We find out a little bit more as well about the magicians, the other magicians, not the ones that are right now, you know, with Solomon. The magicians of the world, how they were pretty much brainwashing people like Sheba into believing all creatures that aren't, you know, magicians are bad, they're evil and whatnot. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those magicians, the bad magicians that aren't with Solomon, are possibly some of the Al-Thaman members that we see up today. Maybe they made their way with Gyokuin and all them, because there's a lot of people that are kind of like fodder Al-Thaman members, and it's possibly that they're them. Maybe some of them are just people that we see right now that we haven't get a revelation that they're there as well. There's many different things, but I'm guessing that a good chunk of those Al-Thaman members, because there's quite a bit of them, are those old magicians from the old Al-Mataran world, and they're just there like following orders of Gyokuin because they respect her for, you know, her evil ways and what she's trying to accomplish. And last but not least, one of the big things of this chapter is that Solomon is showing Sheba the way of not hating other species, and you can see the change in this character from absolutely hating all of them, listening to all the lessons that she got from the magicians, to now she's kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll play with them, you know, kind of with a smile and whatnot. So you see the change, but then it ends up with, until, you know, something's about to happen next week, some shit is about to go down. So it's definitely, you're seeing a lot of the characters and where they're going in the past, what was going on with them. Solomon, his characterization, Sheba, how she was slowly developing from absolutely being prejudiced towards these creatures to now she's more accepting of them, and that's definitely due to Solomon. So I'm guessing that it's definitely going to be something very impactful. Maybe Solomon was pierced, or Solomon was attacked by some sort of monster, and that slowly kept on having people like Sheba fall into the pravity, and eventually maybe Sheba's like, you know what, at one point I did respect what you said, and I did listen to them, but they clearly were attacking you. There's no other reason other than that you can't trust anybody but magicians. And while this chapter definitely seemed very simplistic, at the same time, if you look at a lot of things that I just mentioned, there is a lot of context and a lot of foreshadowing for things and connections. So I'm in the middle of like maybe from a 7.5 to an 8 for this chapter. I more so want to say an 8 because I feel as though it did provide a lot of these things that I was just discussing, but at the same time it felt like a 7.5. So I'll leave it to you guys, 7.5 or an 8. No more than that really, because while this is that Magi greatness, don't get it twisted, it was a pretty simple chapter of giving more so characterization, a little bit of development for Sheba, and just kind of connection. So, you know what? Me personally, I give it an 8. Maybe I feel it's a little bit less, but fuck it. It just felt like there was a lot to talk about and a lot of context. Hopefully next week we see what the hell is going to change Sheba, or maybe we get a little mini time skip a few years later to see how she's turned out since these events of her slowly changing, and maybe we'll see an attack from the other magicians. Maybe they'll come in and, you know, they'll strike or something. It got to be something that is going to be that impactful, because Solomon definitely seems as though he's similar to Aladdin, where he could change people, but it's got to be something that's going to completely just destroy these people. And the only thing I could think of that would make Ethnon, especially Ethnon, because while he's, you know, very stern, he also seems like he really respects and cares for Solomon. So it has to be Solomon's death at the hands of another creature. Solomon just, maybe he misconstrued what Solomon was ultimately trying to teach him. There's something there that would totally change somebody, because you don't be best friends and then all of a sudden go a completely different path for no reason. There's something definitely that's going to make a lot of these people distraught and ultimately go. And not to mention, we still have some introductions from a lot of characters. We still haven't seen Amon. We haven't seen Paimon. There's a lot of characters that I'm really interested to see in the backstory. So there's going to be quite a while with this Al-Mataran arc. So far, very smooth sailing, a lot of good stuff, and you need these chapters as well. A little bit of a setup and characterization. So good shit overall. I really enjoyed this chapter. Definitely just looking forward to seeing what happens next. Nothing really other than that to say. But let me know what you guys think. First of all, what do you think is the connection between the 72 staffs and the 72 dungeons and the Jinn? Do you think that they're ultimate simulation with those, and that's pretty much how they became these Jinn, but the Magi of that world didn't want to? Again, Gyokuin. That also makes you question Judal. Like, is Judal from that world, or how did he get his hands on that staff and became a Magi? Was he possessed? Was he killed and brought back via Ugo? What made these people become Magi? Because Judal, if I'm correct, he was born on this world, so what would make him ultimately become what he is now and still be a Magi? So a lot of things that definitely make you wonder what's up with this. Why is Judal a Magi, but it seems as though he was born on this world? World? Was he just reincarnated as Amagi from someone else? A lot of good questions. And just overall thoughts of the chapter. Were you disappointed with this one? I personally thought it was another good one, another solid one. Not as great as the past couple weeks, but we need stuff like this, and it just gave a lot of info, and I definitely appreciated that. But that's all I have for this review. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Thumbs up for these 72 Jins, 72 Divine Staffs, because right now the info is slowly coming together. The pieces are slowly starting to be put on the puzzle. We just gotta wait and get the whole picture soon, and I'm excited to see a lot of these characters that we know and love and where they were back then in that old Alma-Tehran arc. Like, what was Paimon doing with them giant jugs? I'm Finette World, and as always, people, have an awesome day.